So, the other day there was a question posed um, about airborne mercury vapor, and they was wondering why haven't anybody discussed or elaborated on that particular topic. And I told the person that commented that I would look into it, and I I took a look into it, and I wanted to share what I have found about the effects of mercury, of how it's induced, because he was talking about airborne mercury poison, like it's in the air. And you want to discuss it, but you also want to give your input and also refute the effects of mercury, especially airborne mercury. You're not going to refute the actual effects of mercury, because these things have been studied, like research behind the effects of mercury on humans, and come into contact with it, how you're exposed to it, and yeah, let's get into it. So here is an AI overview of mercury. This is AI. This isn't coming from a source of a person, but from artificial intelligence overview. So let's discuss it. Mercury is a highly toxic metal that can have severe effects on human health. Effects on the nervous system: tremors, coordination problems, memory loss, irritability, personality changes, and seizures. Effects on the kidney: mercury effects on the kidney. Effects on the kidney: kidney damage, proteinuria, excessive protein in the urine, and kidney failure. When dealing with a specific people, they normally have kidney failure. They suffer from kidney failures, and they relate that to diabetes, or having a history of diabetes in your family. So we might have to consider how mercury plays a role in how our kidneys are being affected, especially as a certain people. When you eat certain foods, like they'll tell you, like fish and any shellfish, like shrimp, fish, lobster, crabs. Certain people, like my family, we grew up, we ate crab, or they ate crabs, and every time they got together, they ate crabs, and that is a shellfish. Shellfish is lobster, shrimp. It's a few others that would be considered shellfish, but for the most part, those are, shellfish. So the effects on the kidney, kidney damage, proteinuria, excessive protein in the urine, and kidney failure. Effects on the cardiovascular system: high blood pressure, heart disease, and stroke. Again, high blood pressure would be something that you find in a certain people, especially when they like a lot of salt, that can raise your blood pressure. And, it goes hand in hand with heart disease. And heart disease, goes hand in hand with stroke. And other effects: skin rashes, eye irritation, gastrointestinal problems, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, birth defects in pregnant women, exposure routes, inhalation of mercury vapors, ingestion of mercury contaminated food or water, and skin contact with mercury. Symptoms of mercury poisoning. Symptoms can vary depending on the amount and duration of exposure. Acute mercury poisoning, high doses, can cause severe symptoms including seizures, coma, and death. Chronic mercury poisoning, low doses over long periods, can lead to neurological problems, kidney damage, and other health issues. You have treatment for mercury poisoning. Depends on the severity of exposure and the symptoms present. It may include chelation therapy to remove mercury from the body, medications to manage symptoms, dialysis for kidney damage. I've had, a few of my family undergo dialysis for kidney damage. And it could be related to mercury. And those are just the treatments. The treatments for mercury poisoning, which depends on the severity of exposure and the symptoms present. So, how to prevent, the accumulation of mercury in the body, and you avoid eating fish and shellfish that are high in mercury. Limit exposure to mercury vapor in workplaces and homes. Wash hands thoroughly after handling mercury containing products. Dispose of mercury containing waste properly. It's important to note that mercury is a potent neurotoxin, and even low levels of exposure can have harmful effects. If you suspect you or someone you know has been exposed to mercury, seek medical attention immediately. So that's just the AI overview of mercury and how the exposure can have an effect on the human body. So low-level long-term exposures can cause muscle tremors, irritability, personality changes, or rashes. Nerve damage from mercury may start with a loss of sensitivity in hands and feet, difficulty in walking or slurred speech. In rare cases, it has caused paralysis and even death. So that's, human, the effects of mercury. And another thing that I wanted to get into was, our technology. Our technology has a high or a certain percentage of mercury in it. I believe I ran across what it was. It has at least 2 grams of mercury just alone in the cellular phones. And then you have mercury is an invisible or visible substance that when it's in the air you can't see it. So the amounts of mercury that may be present in the atmosphere can be, a large amount to a small amount, but because it's in our technology, radios and our TVs and our cell phones and our computers and our laptops, we may get let's see. Here we go. This is another AI. This is Copilot. This is the answer from Copilot. Then we'll get into this. You know. Okay. So you got to understand. This is from. You'll have one study from 2012, and you'll have another study that's you know and here we have it as mentioned above. Mercury is found in cell phones and is used for LCD screens. Mercury is possibly one of the most toxic chemicals, so we're handling mercury on a daily basis just by holding a cell phone in our hand. This thing, it contains mercury. Our cell phones, our laptops, our TVs, everything that has some sort of crystal display or circuit boards, and everything that's electronic has a circuit board. So let's read this particular answer from Copilot, which is an AI. Mercury is used in cell phones for battery, crystal displays, and circuit boards. A single cell phone contains up to 2 grams of mercury, which can contribute to brain and kidney damage. Mercury is one of the most toxic chemicals to dispose of, as it can contaminate the earth, water, and air if it is not disposed of correctly. The battery in the phone also contains carbon, mercury, cadmium, and lithium cobalt oxide. I guess this is where you have the lithium battery, So this is an AI find on mercury in cell phones. So this is where you would get this a factual source of how much mercury is in our phones and our technology, and we wanted to share that, to elaborate on it. So your internet is a lot faster than that. I'm going to agree to this. So this is the article from October 15th, 2013. And it's cell phones, toxins, and the harmful effects on the human body when recycled improperly. When cell phones are improperly recycled or end up in landfills, it ultimately causes negative effects to nearly every system in the human body. Mobile phones contain harmful toxins, including lead, mercury, arsenic, cadmium, chlorine, and bromine, which can leak into the groundwater and bioaccumulate in the food chain, causing detrimental damage to the soil, water supply, vegetation, animals, and humans. Come on, dog. Come on. Because I know you want this stuff up here, and you don't eat this stuff. So, come on, bruh. Come on, dog. Dog, you do not eat any of this stuff, bruh. This is, my remains of my pizza. He definitely don't eat any of this stuff, And this isn't pepperoni. This is plant-based. So nothing had to, die in order for me to live. And he definitely don't want this salad. So go ahead, get out of here, dog. Come on, bruh. Come on, dog. Come on. Could you skedaddle? Come on, bruh. Come on, dog. Come on. Dog's a wild one. Okay. Cadmium, chlorine, and bromine, which can leak into the groundwater and bioaccumulate in the food chain, causing detrimental damage to the soil, water supply, vegetation, animals, and humans. Lead. Lead is found in a wide variety of cell phone components, including the circuit boards, batteries, and as a stabilizer in PVC products. Lead exposure can cause damage to the reproductive, blood, and nervous system. Mercury is used in cell phones, batteries, crystal displays, and circuit boards. A single cell phone contains up to 2 grams of mercury. Mercury exposure contributes to brain and kidney damage. Arsenic. Arsenic is found in the microchips of many electronic devices, including mobile phones. In high doses, arsenic poisoning is lethal. Low levels of exposure cause negative impacts on skin, liver, nervous, and respiratory system. Then you have cadmium. Cadmium is used in the battery of cell phones. It is associated with defects in cognition, learning, behavior, and neuromotor skills in children. It has also been linked to kidney damage. Then you have chlorine. Chlorine is a component of plastics used in cell phones, specifically polyvinyl chloride, PVC. PVC makes up about 30% of cell phones. Exposure to improperly disposed chlorine causes tissue damage and the destruction of cell structures. Then you have bromine or bromine is a component in a group of fire retardant chemicals known as brominated flame retardants. It is associated with cognitive and developmental deficits. Studies have shown that bromine contributes to the disruption in the thyroid hormone balance, brain damage, and cancer. E-waste accounts for 2.5% of the U.S. municipal solid waste stream and continues to rise by 3 to 5% each year. Increasing the amount of harmful toxins leaked into our ecosystem to stop this deadly trend. Businesses and individuals need to recycle used cell phones and other electronics only with e-stewards certified recyclers to ensure their toxic e-waste does not end up in landfills. E-stewards is the globally recognized gold standard for responsible electronics recycling. So they have a standard, as far as electronic recycling. So when we get these electronics, due to the newness of them, they haven't been around for over the technology that we have more than 30, 20, 25, 30 years. When dating back, how far back do they go? So we have new generations of people coming along and having access to these technologies, and they adopt our previous the previous generations concern for the global economy and or the global or the environment itself, and we really didn't care too much about our environment. So we had a lot of pollution, a lot of trash and clutter that we allow to be seen by the generation that succeeds us. And with that, they tend to not recycle electronics in a standard form. They just, like me personally, in my community, I see a lot of these vapes. When they're done with a vape normally becomes trash, or they just throw it out. You just throw it on the ground. And inside of vapes, they have, batteries and other electronics, and this becomes part of our environmental makeup. Trash here, batteries there, litter there. So we don't have a certain standard when it comes to disposing electronics. So there is actually a gold standard, which is e-steward. E-steward is an organization. So it's certified electronic recycling company. So we should seek to get e-steward into home recycling, maybe for a fee or whatever, but they should be able to pick up electronics that are no longer wanted, especially if they're going to be waste anyway. So there should be a way for these e-recycling companies to establish companies or businesses in all cities where we are able to dispose of our electronics in a responsible fashion. So yeah, I've never heard of e-stewards, but that's what they said is the gold standard for electronic waste. So eCycle is the trusted wireless mobile buyback and recycling partner for many of the largest organizations in the world. As the first mobile recycling company to achieve e-steward certification, we adhere to the highest standards for environmental responsibility and worker health and safety. eCycle offers a simple, secure, environmentally responsible, and profitable way for businesses to sell and recycle used mobile phones and tablets. Learn more at www.e-cycle.com. So this is, that's a business that caters towards properly disposing old phones and old electronics so they don't become an impact on our environment. So they're taking preventative measures to restrict the global the effects on our globe, how used cell phones and used technology may impact the whole globe. So that's a pretty good company to look into. It's called what is it? eCycle. So yeah, this is their website. I guess this is the website, but recycle, recover, protect. So yeah. Dog, man. Some people, some cats get the zoomies in the night. He gets it, whenever he feels like it. So that's dealing with just that technology. Hazardous chemicals you're throwing out when disposing a phone. I'm going to accept those cookies. This is Electronic Recycling Association, which is ERA. This is on a blog. So, do you know what hazardous chemicals you're throwing out when disposing of your old phone? When it comes to disposing of our unwanted or used electronics, do we really know where they go and how hazardous they can be to our environment. There are many toxic materials within our electronic devices. Take a cell phone as an example, which has over 500 components. Many of these contain toxic metals such as mercury, lead, beryllium, and cadmium. Touchscreen cell phones contain indium oxide and tin oxide, which is used in a clear film on the screen. This mixture conducts electricity and allows the screen to function as a touchscreen. Most of the glass used in smartphones is aluminosilicate glass, aluminosilicate glass made from a mixture of alumina and silica, along with some potassium ions for strength. As mentioned above, mercury is found in cell phones and is used for LCD screens. Mercury is possibly one of the most toxic chemicals to dispose of, as it can contaminate the earth, water, and air if it is not disposed of correctly. The battery in phones also contain carbon, mercury, cadmium, and lithium cobalt oxide. Due to such hazardous chemicals, proper disposal is crucial to ensuring the health of our environment. Circuit boards and microchips that are found in phones, computers, and laptops contain lead and arsenic, which are poisonous to living organisms in large amounts. While these are safely inside your phone when you are using it, once it ends up in a landfill, the lead and arsenic leak into the soil, causing damage to our ecosystem. All of these hazardous substances can cause serious health risks and impact our environment through many types of pollution, air, water, soil pollution being the main three. To save our environment and to ensure our health isn't at risk, we should dispose of our electronic devices correctly and carefully. Some ways to do this is as follows. Hand them down to a friend or a member of the family, as opposed to having an accumulation of these gadgets. So, stop looking at it. You know, come on. All these to save our environment and to ensure our health isn't at risk, we should dispose of our electronic devices correctly, carefully. Some ways to do this is as follow. Hand them down to a friend or a member of the family. You know, again, as opposed to having an accumulation of cell phones and old unwanted technology that's just laying around, and that might end up, you might throw away, or it's just laying around. You hand them down to friends and old family members, or you could even donate them to other people, whether they're a friend or a family member. You can recycle them. Once they reach the end of a life cycle, donate them to a local charity. Give them to an organization who will ensure data is right and your device finds a new home. Mm-hmm. So those are ways to safely, dispose of cell phones and old electronics that you may not want and might not know that you can't really throw these things away, like put them in trash. They have to actually be recycled, because once they fill landfills, they leak into the earth, and that gets into the soil, and once it's in the soil, it gets into vegetation. It can get into vegetation. All this stuff happens when it rains. When it rains and the water, it drives these chemicals throughout the soil, and those are the effects. It can here we have a picture of just old cell phones and the accumulation of cell phones. So this is the website is called, this is ERA, Electronic Recycling Association. And this was just a blog that they had relating to the disposal of phones, and telling you how the effects of phones accumulate and can have an impact on our environment. But back to first we want to talk a little bit more about Mercury. Since that was the discussion. Because they said that Mercury is being, or the question was if Mercury, if airborne Mercury, the effects of that airborne Mercury, the effects on people of all ages. So, exposure to methyl mercury most commonly occurs when people eat kinds of fish and shellfish that have high levels of methyl mercury in their tissues. Almost all people have at least small amounts of methyl mercury in their bodies, reflecting the widespread presence of methyl mercury in the environment. Meaning that there's a wide amount of it already known. Whether before people get into the conspiracy theory that it's stuff that's being sprayed in the air, and it could be methyl mercury or some sort of poisonous gas that has an effect on the human behavior. Which this is the reason why I wanted to refute that. Come on, dog. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on, dog. Come on. Come on. Come on. All right. All right. That's my cat, man. So, like I said, I wanted to refute that because you don't want to not say that it doesn't have an effect on a people when it's dealing with their behavior and the way that they act, and dealing with paranoia and stuff like that. So almost all people have at least a small amount of methyl mercury in their bodies, reflecting the widespread presence of methyl mercury in the environment. The U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC data show that most people have blood mercury levels below levels associated with possible health effects. Methyl mercury, however, is a powerful neurotoxin, and people exposed to high levels may experience adverse health effects. If you are concerned about exposure to methyl mercury, you should consult your physician. Possible symptoms of methyl mercury poisoning may include loss of peripheral vision. You won't be able to see out your peripheral vision. Pins and needles, fillings usually in the hands, feet and around the mouth, like pins and needles. Lack of coordination of movement. Lack of coordination of movement, like body movement. You know, like I don't want to poke fun at nobody, but when you really can't, you do the Elon. You've been seeing Elon dance lately. If say you used to dance like Michael Jackson at one point in time, then all of a sudden you start doing the Elon. The Elon. You're not poking fun. Elon knows that he's not really the best dancer, but once you have lack of coordination of movement, if you can't coordinate your movement how you want to, then you may have some sort of, mercury poisoning, impairment of speech, hearing, walking, and or muscle weakness. And that's dealing with methylmercury and mercury poisoning. And these are some of the possible symptoms and effects on infants. Infants in the womb can be exposed to methylmercury when their mothers eat fish and shellfish that contains methylmercury. This exposure can adversely affect unborn infants' growing brains and nervous system. These systems may be more vulnerable to methylmercury than the brains and nervous systems of adults are. Children exposed to methylmercury while they are in the womb can have impacts to their cognitive thinking, memory, attention, language, fine motor skills, and visual spatial skills. So this comes from study. So there's a certain effect that just eating shellfish and or certain types of other fish while pregnant can have an effect on a child while it's developing. Whether it passes through the adult female's body how it's supposed to, but it would impair or affect the development of a unborn child. So that's the effects on infants and children. Additional resources, guidelines for eating fish that contains mercury, how people are most commonly exposed to methylmercury, technical summaries of risk assessment for methylmercury in EPA's and IRIS database. So these are additional resources where you can go and check out these particular articles or resources. Elemental mercury, metallic mercury. Exposure to metallic mercury most often occur when metallic mercury is spilled or when products that contain metallic mercury breaks, so that the mercury is exposed to the air. If you are concerned about your exposure to metallic mercury, you should consult your physician. Metallic mercury mainly causes health effects when inhaled as a vapor when it can be absorbed through the lungs. Symptoms of prolonged and or acute exposure includes tremors, emotional change such as mood swings, irritability, nervousness, and excessive shyness. So these are, mercury, the effects of mercury: excessive shyness, nervousness, irritability, mood swings. And, these are emotional changes. Insomnia. You would be in insomnia. Which is the lack of sleep, and that can be a symptom of prolonged and or acute exposure to mercury. Neuromuscular changes such as weakness, muscular atrophy, twitching. These are neuromuscular changes. You have headaches, which is is common amongst mankind. Mankind always normally have a headache in some form or fashion. Disturbances and sensations, disturbances and sensations, um, changes in nerve responses and or poor performance on tests of mental function. Higher exposure may also cause kidney effects, respiratory failure, and death. Note that metallic mercury vapor is not the same as methyl mercury. They're not the same. So you have the metallic mercury vapor, which is like a vapor that comes from metal or a metallic mercury. The metallic mercury. Mercury is like if you ever seen the Terminator, it was the guy, he was able to transform into certain things that would be like the metallic mercury. If that's only if you saw that, but if you wanted to have a peek of what metallic mercury looks like, we'll go to images. Like this is what metallic mercury, it looks like. It looks like water, but it's actually a silverish, looks like the liquid silver, but it's actually mercury. So other mercury compounds. Okay, so you got additional resources, how people are commonly exposed to elemental metallic mercury, technical summary of risk assessments for elemental mercury in EPA's IRIS database. So, other mercury compounds. High exposure to inorganic mercury may result in damage to gastrointestinal tract, the nervous system, and the kidneys. Both inorganic and organic mercury are absorbed through the gastrointestinal tract and affects other systems through this route. Symptoms of high exposure to inorganic mercury include skin rashes, dermatitis, mood swings, memory loss, mental disturbances, and or muscle weaknesses. Some people who drink water containing inorganic mercury substantially in excess of maximum contaminant levels for many years could experience kidney damage. If you are concerned about an exposure to inorganic mercury, you should consult your physician. Now, this is additional resources, how people are most commonly exposed to other mercury compounds, information about inorganic mercury in drinking water, technical summary of risk assessment for mercuric chloride in EPA's IRIS database. So that's the health effects of exposure to mercury. And as the guy was stating, airborne mercury vapor. He discussed, airborne mercury vapor, and he's never heard anyone talk about it in any video. So I've noticed similar, no identical symptoms off and on for identical symptoms are caught. Let's see what he says. Something a female said in the video, and I immediately looked it up, and all the symptoms of it, So this was because someone said something in a video that he was, concerned about the exposures of mercury, and mercury vapors, especially when it's airborne. So he's not saying that it's actually airborne as far as, of people putting it in the atmosphere, but as far as it just being in the air, through our technology alone, may have an effect on the exposure of mercury in the air, So that is, the effects of exposure to mercury. And with that, I wanted to say that it doesn't it doesn't affect people, like you would think that it's something in the water that makes people, you know, act the way that they act, and it's something that's beyond our control, and maybe something, that we're eating may have an effect on that. But it's, for us to believe that it's something in the air that's triggering this type of um, mannerism, especially when it's on a wide scale, and we would wonder what it is that's making people from all different walks of life, behave in a way that's just, it's a destructive nature, especially when you see it. It's not that. It's definitely not that, because I live out here, you know, I live in a Jewish community, and I've been out here for more than, 10 years, more than 10 years, definitely over 10 years, and I haven't seen a fight amongst the Jews out here. Haven't heard an argument amongst the Jews out here. And they have cell phones. They have access to the same exact technology that the rest of the world has access to, but they are not tuned into a certain broadcast that other people are tuned into. If you was to come up to this part of my city, you would see that it's different from other parts of the city. You would see that it's a lot different. If you was to go, in this particular setting, you would see, oh, it's peaceful out here. But if you went to other areas, you would see drugs. You would see, drug addicts. You would see, just the hustle and bustle of everyday life outside of what would be considered a peaceful environment. And if Mercury was the cause, of people being irritable and paranoid and having and a disastrous and toxic effect on each other, then it would affect all people. It would affect all people. I'm pretty much sure they eat the same snacks that we eat. They may eat halal, or what is it, halal? That's dealing with Muslims. They eat kosher. Their animals are slaughtered in a different fashion than the other animals, and it could be a case of something in the food, which is studies show that cows, if they're not slaughtered a certain kind of way, it's a certain poison that will get into the bloodstream and affect the people that actually eat that. But I wouldn't know, because I stopped eating animal a long time ago, and it can affect, because we just spoke about landfills and how arsenic and mercury and cadmium gets into the soil, and once it gets into the soil, it can affect produce. So the mercury in the air can have an effect on the produce as well. So even if you're all vegetables or all plant-based, you can still be affected by mercury. What I tend to understand about the growing, sickness in the world is that it's a source or it's a broadcast that people are tuned into, and once you're tuned into that broadcast, you become amongst, you know, those that are affected by it. You know, like me, I don't listen to music. Like I said, if I listen to music, it's at my own discretion. You know, I listen to it at my own discretion, and you don't just tune into any and everything, but there's a frequency that's being distributed to the people on a global or a mass scale, and those that are not able to comprehend what that signal is, they normally are recipients of the signal, and that signal has a toxic effect on a people's behavior, whether it's a fashion thing or it's a lustful thing, but it normally has some sort of influence on a person's it has an effect on people's, I want to say, their thinking and how they do certain things. So you know, that's just what I seen, you know, what I see, you know, because I don't watch the same TV shows that everybody watch. I don't listen to the same music that everybody watch, and I have a certain level of peace that you know, I don't understand why it's not as common. This type of peace isn't as common as it should be, you know. But there's a source that produces these effects, and those are the reasons why most people are affected by it. You know, this is where you have, when if you resist the devil would flee. You know, when you resist the devil flees. So once you start resisting certain music, certain things that are broadcast to you, whether it's news, whether it's TV shows, talk shows, whatever, once you start to resist them, you know, you will stop seeing this particular thing as you know, prominent as it actually is. You wouldn't see it as much because you've turned away from it. You know, you resisted it. You know, because what we have is a lot of people saying that they're, you know, America is being is going to the wayside. You know, and they're going to leave America. You know, as opposed to them, you know, resisting that information. They've become consumed with too much of that information. During this, in this information or the news that's being put out, there's not too much counter good news. You know, it's not too much counter news that counters the bad news. There's not too much good news that counters the bad news. So there's no way for them to drown out all of the news. You know, when soon as you you know, pull up a page, Donald Trump issues chilling 8 words warning, you know, chilling 8 words warning, then Aya, whatever her name is, says she received insane death threat from Elon Musk, spread fake news about her. You know, Freemason, a history of the world's most powerful secret society. Explore the myths and counter, you know, breaking Ukraine admits Zelensky's ordered bombing of biggest pipeline, you know, so it's just a ball of, you know, then they got these guys, you know, with the Masonic hand signs. Let me do it again. The Masonic hand signs, you know, things that upset God, biblically insight. See, boom, boom, you know, and you know, it's you know, it's just so much stuff that we are seeing, you know. Musk Doge shutters 1 billion affordable housing program. You know, it's just a broadcast of you know, disturbing news. So if you getting disturbing news, you create a disturbing people because the people are disturbed. If you're disturbing news, if it's disturbing news, you're not going to relay this to peaceful people or create a people of peace. You're going to create a disturbed people. You know, Jay-Z's stuff that's really, you know, not important. Jay-Z attorney speaks out about investigation into, you know, allegations. And at the same time, you have them, you know, digging into how did the New Testament form. You know, with, you know, these are things that people are interested in. You know, things that pique the interest of people. Canadian issues blunt 6-word warning to Donald Trump as trade war escalates. It's a trade war. Oh my God! But this is just when you click on it. As soon as you open up a tab, you get it. As soon as you open up a tab. Operation Undead trailer. You got a new movie coming. Canada announces retaliatory tariffs on nearly 30 billion worth of U.S. imports. Man, Canada's gonna use tariffs on imports. Upsetting civil servants across the U.S. U.S. part of Department of Education. Upsetting former Columbia University student Mama Kalau to remain detained. You know, this is just an ongoing escalation of just bad news. You know, and there's a people that's hooked on, you know, currency. You know, there's a people that's hooked on currency, and that's just, you know, a thing for people to focus on. And then there's always talk about currency. So these are things that are attention grabbing, you know, things that capture and grab attention on a wide scale, you know, on a mass scale. And like I said, it normally has a source, and that source has to be a certain kind of way, because what we have is called energy harvesting. You know, it's energy harvesting, and with these energy harvesting, they have vultures as well. You know, vultures, like literally vultures, that are waiting for this energy to be harvested so they could, you know, feast off of it. This is when you have these people with these platforms, and they just discuss, you know, the common or the current topics, and the not just any current topic, but, you know, it's a certain lust for, you know, a bloodlust that they have, and they just pick up on it. If you was to go and, you know, type in what's that singer's name, or I even forget her name, but she has a certain name, and you know, with my page, you know, it's you know, I fill myself with, you know, prophetic word and good information on my page, you know, but I don't even know her name. But the female that they said just passed away in an automobile crash, D'Angelo's, Angela, I know D'Angelo, and what's her name, Angie Stone, there she go, Angie Stone. If you was to type in Angie Stone, you know, and see what all comes up, you know, cover up, you know, cover up, you know, cover up. Angie Stone did not die in that van, you know. Angie Stone, no more rain, you know. It's just a pouring out, or just a accumulation of you know, you know, people want to see this type of stuff. People want to talk about it. You know, people want to see that these things are you know, what you would call what would be called energy harvesting, and then you would have a lot of people that discuss it, which would become vultures. They don't wait. They wait until there's a tragic event about you, and then they'll jump on the bandwagon to talk about it. And once they talk about it, they capitalize off of your demise. And like I said, these things are biblical. When they crucified Christ, they casted lots on his garments, on his clothes. So these things are just the escalation of what's already written, and you see the ways of the people, by what they, just by what they display, and what the people flock to on a wide scale. See, when you have uncommon knowledge, and that there's a problem with people, and you're not there to chastise them or to make them feel bad about their problems, but to offer them solutions for their problems, and what you have to offer isn't common, it's actually uncommon, and they tend to check out common knowledge. What can these people say that's any different than the next people? When there's a topic of discussion, what more can you find? If they don't did the research, one person did the research and gave you all the information that you could possibly get out of it, what more? How much different can the next person's information be, especially if you're not an insider, especially if you're not a person that knows them intimately or know them personally? What more information can you give them that's different from the information that's already out? So this is what's a part of the problem, just having common sense. Common sense, like I said, is part of the problems. We have to have extraordinary sense, because if it's common sense, it's a sense that people share in common. And if what's in common is a certain, energy that's being shared, this is the only thing that you're going to be, recycling. This only thing that you're going to be generating is a common sense. So you have to seek sense that's outside of the common, that's uncommon, in order for you to find a solution to any problem. It has to be uncommon and extraordinary sense. We want common sense, and common sense doesn't do nothing but just, keep you in a loop. What can that person say that's common that the next person can say that's common? Can't say any different, because they both have common sense, or everybody that's watching it has common sense. So that's one of the things that I wanted to say, because we wanted to believe that there's something in the air, but it's something wrong. It's something in mankind himself. Mankind has a flair and an affinity for sin, and tuning into sinful things. They have a sinful nature. And if you don't understand that this thing is deep rooted in the history of mankind, then you have to go. If you first and foremost, you have to be, inquisitive about it, and then you have to go back and see how deep rooted it is. It's not something that's unknown. Like everything that we know is known to all. What can this person tell me that's any different than that person? No, I want to tune in to somebody that's not tuned into what no one else is tuned in, so I can learn something new, instead of learning what's common. But we need a certain commonality. We need to be on common. They want you to be on common ground. So when you're on common ground, this preps you for AI. This being on common ground preps you for artificial intelligence thinking for you, so you don't think on your own. You're thinking in a group. So it's just prepping you to be controlled by something outside of yourself. So this is what energy harvesting is. They're harvesting your energy, energy harvesting. Energy harvesting, what you see right here, how energy is harvested, so you can have a certain energy. So all this is taken from here, from here, from here, from here, and then it's used to generate one thing, so this is how a system is established. It takes energy from all different directions, from violence, from entertainment, from comedy, from sports, from the communities in the hood, from or activities in the hood. It's just bottling all of that energy and using it to function, to run, a certain system. So it's a form of energy harvesting. They'll give you what energy harvesting is. Energy is derived from external sources, also known as power harvesting. Energy scavenging or ambient power is the process by which energy is derived from external sources. But here they're talking about solar power, thermal energy, and all sorts of other things. But in our society, it would be from all different aspects of our reality. And one of the ones that they find so energy potent is our knack for destruction and bad news. That generates a lot of power for them. It generates a lot of energy. So whatever you get a lot of people focus their attention on, this is what they give their energy to. So if you see that certain things aren't doing that well as far as exposure wise, especially when you got certain YouTube channels, you got certain YouTube channels, then they really don't have a lot of views and stuff like that. They tend to, there's not a lot of energy focused towards this. And this person might just have uncommon knowledge, which, a lot of people might want to check out because, the knowledge they have is common. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows everything they know. Everything that everybody else knows, And that's the thing. And when you know what everybody else knows, you kind of like have no identity. Your identity becomes the same identity as everybody else because you're all thinking in common, and that's what I see is part of the problem. It's not anything in the water, or it's just the source of information that's being distributed to a people, and they're all receiving that information collectively. At first we had the widespread cheating and Maury's and Jerry Springer's and things like that. Then we had Ricky Lakes and stuff like that. We had talk shows and they really wasn't that messy. Then we had a certain talk show that came that gave you the ideas of people, of how people are. So we assumed that that was the way that people was supposed to be. So now that's starting to pan. That's starting to go away. Like there's not too much you can get out of cheating and infidelity. And for me, or infidelity. So and for me, I know that cheating is just a form of betrayal. If a person cheats, they're just a person that betrayed you. And normally they have a weakness, and it's not about cheating. It's about lust. If a person is a cheater, they have a problem with lust, and these aren't things that you can address by overshadowing what the problem is. In fact, I watched a movie last night, and it brought me back to the Bible, and the way people were. It was called, I think, Seven Deadly Sins. Let me check it out. Seven Deadly Sins. Or Seven Sins. Let me see. It was on Tubi. Yeah, Seven Deadly Sins. Yep. And it has 7 players, and each one of the players, they was playing a game. It was called Charlie Charlie, and it was about each one of the sins. And we're not gonna play this, but this is what it actually is. Um, and it talked about the 7 deadly sins. Each one of them had a certain sin that they had to overcome, or that sin would overcome you, or that sin would be the thing that overcomes you. So at the end, the they use Christ as a way to keep the sin away. And yeah, maybe I should check that movie out. That's why I told you I like horror movies, because it gave you people. It gave you people. It didn't give you a fright. It only gave you more information about certain things that other things won't give you. So you have to look at it from a spiritual perspective. Of some of the things that are displayed in these pictures, especially when it's horror, especially when it's dealing with horror films, especially when it's dealing with horror films, because we wrestle not with flesh and blood, but principalities and heavenly places. So these are things that are principalities and high places. These are principalities that we wrestle with. We wrestle with pride, greed, wrath, lust, envy, gluttony, and sloth. And each and every last single one of these have, you'll see down here, they'll have a counterpart that that you can use to overcome each and every last single one of those. So yeah, I seen that just yesterday, and I believe I saw it before, but I don't think I actually paid any kind of attention to it. But yeah, those are one of the things that we have to be aware of. Like how common things are being shared to how things are being shared to us in common, and this is what makes the sickness just a common thing. Like it's almost normal. And then, like I said, when you as soon as you open up a web page, you're greeted with just the sickness. U.S. immigration detention maxed out at 47,600 detainees, ICE officials say. No. Then they're bringing out, the black women having a problem with Elon Musk to engage other, young black females to, be engaged. If she was, a Caucasian female or whatever, it wouldn't have any kind of, attention pulling ability. It wouldn't be able to pull attention because I can't relate to that. But once you start seeing people that are relative to a particular person, now they take a personal interest in it. Like with the female Jasmine Crockett. With Jasmine Crockett, you would see her all over the place. Beth Van Doon and asked Dims, has anyone actually invited Elon Musk to talk about Doge? Now this is where there's people, siding with, Doge to ask him, like, we was against it, but have anybody ever sat down to talk to him? Maybe it might be a good thing. They first play the villain, then they play the hero, then they play the hero, then they play the villain. We seen that with Hulk Hogan. When we had Hulk Hogan, then we had Hollywood Hogan. Then we had Hulk Hogan again. So you play the hero, then play the villain, and play the hero. Then Tesla's reputational hit while Elon Musk works for Trump is unprecedented. J.P. Morgan. Like his reputational hit while Elon Musk, Tesla's reputational hit. Like, damn, Tesla had a bad reputation. And it's because Elon started working for Trump. Now his stocks is going down, but when you do look at the stock market, Tesla is doing pretty good. I believe it's up maybe 7.65 points on NASDAQ. Let's see. It's even up, 7.59%, up. But they're telling people that his stocks is actually going down. But this is Tesla, as you can see, is going up. So a lot of things is the perception that people have, that they're giving the people, the perception, So this is what the price is up. Price is up. So they're not taking any kind of hit, as is stated by the media, and you can see it over here. You got Nvidia up 6.43%. And J.P. Morgan was the one that was talking about. He took a blow. He took a blow or something like that, and they actually taking a 55% loss, and their stocks is down 55%. But it's all about what's being shown to people. It's what's being shown to people, and what the people don't resist. So that's the bottom line. People don't want to resist. They don't resist. They don't resist bad news. They welcome bad news with open arms and open hands, with an open heart and an open mind, with all their mind, body, and soul. But they don't close out anything that they're supposed to close out. But the moment that they start to resist this stuff, it will flee. They'll have to, switch up the theme, in order to engage the people again. But as long as there's people that has a knack for hearing this type of stuff, there's going to be this type of stuff presented to you. So it's not about running. It's not about running from this country to another country, And as you run to that country has the ability to be influenced by these same exact people, because they're everywhere. It's a global order, that there's no place here where there's a working economy is unaffected by it. So you can go from here, then later after they're done over here, they can do what they did over here, over there, because we seen what um Duterte and the Philippines did to his drug dealers, the drug dealers in the Philippines, and he was commended by President Trump at that time. Trump said, "Yo, that was a good job. They did extrajudicial killings and targeting drug dealers out in the Philippines." Then they carried out all sorts of citizen on citizen violence out there. They had a blackout, and then they just went on a killing spree of known drug dealers, what they called known drug dealers and drug users, which had an impact on other people that wasn't affected by it. So this was just a way for them to reduce a lot of people in that area. And at that time, Trump had commended him for it. Now what you have is Trump making a statement that he should seek the death penalty, seek the death penalty for drug dealers. So you have that right here. This is something that was stated by Trump. To engage the people into considering. Trump has promised to crack down on Mexican cartels by instituting the death penalty for drug dealers and smugglers. And if like I said, we're dealing with energy. When you're dealing with energy harvesting, one of the things that powers the prisons, a lot of cemeteries, and a lot of poverty in United States is drugs. So the drugs being introduced into the United States, especially when I already spoke about this being a CIA thing. CIA brought the drugs out here. When they went to invade certain countries and found out they had resources, like opium, and they manufacture these drugs, and then they unleash them on the people. They create them in a lab, and then they give them to the people. So when you know that, then you know that it's a people that's actually making a living off of these drugs outside of the drug dealers. The drug dealers, they actually get the crumbs of it, but there's people outside of it that's inside of their operations that's already made billions of dollars off of these drugs, and probably more than that, since the drugs was incorporated into American society. Since then, it's been a lot of people that profited from drugs. Then they had something like there's a TV show, I believe it's the Duncan's Family Business, where there was black people, and they was responsible for creating a certain drug, and then other people, because I think they had an ingredient or a certain thing that they used to make the drug that others didn't have. So people outside of that had to come to them in order to get it, and then they was always trying to duplicate the ingredients of it. But I'm not sure. I don't really know too much about it. But this is what you watch this is what you see by being amongst people that's watching it. They would be involved and interested into that. which is common knowledge, which you know, like the ways that you know your hood is common. What more could you learn about what's going on in your hood than that you already know, other than just over sensationalizing it, you know. But that's just something I wanted to share. You know, that you know it's our ability just to be common, and that has an effect on who we actually are as a people, and especially when it comes to inner cities and black communities. There's really no black communities. What I see is, out here, this is a community. This is a community of people because they're all on one accord. And that's the reason why they use that commonality, and it works for them. But for another people who don't have a community to use common knowledge and to share it in common, this creates so much of a conflict, because everybody's all toward this way and toward that way and toward this way and toward that way. From the gangs, they got gangs, different gangs, different religious beliefs, different social statuses, financial, different social and economic statuses in the hood, which creates a discommunity, because we are not all seeing on the same level, because we have different ideologies that separate us, and we have different gangs that separate us, and different social and financial statuses that separate us. So for me to see my people, to see people that look like me, I already know that it's really not a community. And then you look at other people in a community and see that they have a community, where their children is their children, where their children are children, and their adults are adults. The men are men and the women are women, and the elderly are the elderly, So you have so many, and they all play their role in their community. It's what I see being amongst, a people that are what you might want to call set apart, because they, not that they are set apart any different than anybody else. It's just that they set themselves apart, from that, because they can decide to be, just like everybody else, and then yeah, and that's the thing with our leaders. Our leaders have to be the ones that give way to how people are going to be. But if the leaders are the same way as the people that they need to lead, how much leadership can they actually be? When you see, people, if you know that for years people have been fighting and killing over Jordans and starter jackets and stuff like that, and as a leader, why would you go and get Jordans? Shouldn't you be trying to teach them how to say, man, clothes is our least of our problem. Let's get some land. Let's own some land. Let's go and own some this. Let's go and own a brand of clothing that we can sell to them. We got swag. Why don't we create something, outside of Nike and outside of Adidas and outside of Reebok that, that's doper than that, and put our money behind it, and let's make billions off of this. But that's not what our leaders do. Our leaders, they create stuff, and then they'll overcharge their own people for it, and it will never get sold. It'll never be and if they do make it, then if they undersell it, it won't be of value. But if we oversell it, then no one will buy it. So that's just what I see. But who am I to have any kind of opinion, especially when you're like an outcast? Who am I to have any kind of opinion about anything? But that's just what I see. I don't think that it's anything in the air that's making us sick and stuff like that. But I do know that our technology has a lot of hazardous chemicals and hazardous materials in it. You know, I do know that, and I hope that brings awareness to other people. So that they can recycle their devices that they no longer want, and also spread the word to others. About throwing or getting rid of these electronic vapes, because they do have batteries in them, and it has an effect on our environmental safety, not just with that, with wildlife, birds, and our bees and stuff like that. So we don't want that stuff in the environment. you know but yeah, I felt like sharing that because there was a person that wanted some sort of information, and as one that has no problem with sharing information, I felt the need to just quickly put this out and share it, you know, because this may be helpful, you know. So hope that helps somebody, and helps us reduce the impact on our ecosystem with disregarded or improperly disposed of electronics. So peace.